Discover 3 spine-chilling true countryside terrors, sinister secrets exposed from the haunted past. Jess stood on the creaking porch of her grandmother's farmhouse, the fading sunlight casting long shadows that danced eerily across the yard. The house, cloaked in weathered timbers and memories, felt alive, pulsating with unspoken stories. She shivered, a chill racing down her spine as her 2 boys ran, laughing, amidst the tall grasses that fringed the property. But a feeling gnawed at her, like the unsettling quiet in a horror movie just before the scream. The locals, with their warm, too wide smiles and knowing glances, sent prickles of unease crawling across her skin. Mr. Hale, their reclusive neighbor, appeared out of nowhere, offering help with a friendliness that felt oddly sharp, like the edge of a knife. Jess could almost hear the soft whispers of the house as if it was telling her to be cautious. What did I do to deserve this? She thought, the weight of her recent divorce pressing heavy on her shoulders. As they unpacked, Noah and Eli fluttered around, eyes wide with the thrill of their new adventure. But then Jess noticed the barn across the yard. Symbols carved into the timber. It felt off, thrumming with an energy that made her stomach clench. She shook her head, willing away the unease. Just old wood, she told herself. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something dark lurked just beyond the trees, something that watched them. The first night, whispers echoed through the silence, weaving into the nightmares of her boys. Jess woke to Eli, sitting up in bed, eyes wide. "Mommy, there's a man outside. He talks to me." Panic surged through her chest. "There's no man, Eli. It's just your imagination," she insisted, though her voice trembled as she turned back to the window. The moon illuminated empty fields, nothing moving but the wind through the grass. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Days folded into each other, each bringing a deeper chill. Jess found deep footprints etched in the tall grass, leading to those dreaded woods, their inviting darkness pierced by a familiar yet terrifying thrill. What could live among the trees? Her heart raced each time she heard the echo of giggles, thinking of Noah and Eli playing, unaware of the encroaching danger. It gnawed at her, this growing dread, the frightened glances from the neighbors. That night, a storm rolled through, rattling the old house's bones. Jess stared out at the barn as the wind howled, the symbols glowing faintly under the flickering light. A sense of urgency gripped her. A darkness loomed, palpable and suffocating. Every instinct screamed to flee, but where would they go? Then came the sight that solidified her growing fear. Mr. Hale, among the trees, murmuring in a low, guttural tone, the shadows wrapping around him like lost souls. Jess's breath caught in her throat. The whispers of her boys echoed in her mind. They had been right, something sinister stirred in the depths of Hawthorne, and it had taken note of them. Would she find the courage to face this nightmare, or would she be consumed by it too? Jess couldn't shake the sight of Mr. Hale, his figure swallowed by the dark woods. Panic curled in her stomach, turning it into a heavy stone. She stumbled away from the window, the shadows inside the house seeming to close around her. The barn, the carvings, she had to check them now. A primal instinct called her, urging her to uncover the truth before it was too late. "Boys, stay in bed," she whispered, trembling hands gripping the doorframe as she stepped outside. The wind howled, tugging at her clothes, chilling her to the bone. Each step toward the barn felt like crossing into another realm, far from the innocence of her boys' laughter. The air thickened with dread, the night had become an entity of its own, watching her, waiting. As Jess approached the barn, she could make out the symbols more clearly. They twisted and curled, resembling gnarled roots tangled in a nightmare. The wood was damp from the storm, glistening ominously in the pale light. She squinted, trying to make sense of the markings, her heart clawing at her chest. Suddenly, a sharp chill cut through her, as if a whisper of ice brushed against her neck. Jess turned quickly, her senses on high alert. But nothing stirred. The laughter of her boys felt distant now, muffled under the weight of the night. It was an eerie contrast to the sense of urgency battling against the bone-deep fear coiling in her gut. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the barn's door. It creaked open smoothly, as if inviting her in. Inside, the darkness enveloped her. She strained her eyes, revealing only dusty shadows that danced in the corners. The air hung heavy with decay and something sharper, something rotten. Then she noticed an old, tattered journal lying in a corner. She bent down to pick it up, brushing off the layer of dust. The cover was worn, but a symbol etched on it looked alarmingly familiar. It was one of the carvings from the barn. Her heart raced as she flipped open to the first page. Once bound by blood, the woods will call for blood. The words came alive, echoing in her skull. What did that mean? Her disquiet deepened, a knot tightening in her throat as she flipped through pages filled with frantic scrawls, stories of rituals and shadows rising, spoken in a tone so desperate it sent shivers down her spine. Suddenly, there was movement at the entrance. Jess spun around. Her heart dropped. Noah and Eli stood there, wide-eyed and shivering as the wind whipped behind them, framing their small figures in the doorway. "Mommy, we heard you talking to someone." Noah's voice quivered as he spoke, trembling but resolute. "There's a man in the woods, he's calling us." Jess's blood ran cold. She rushed toward them, scooping her boys into her arms. "You can't listen to him. Promise me you won't go near the trees." The fear radiated between them, making her grip tighter. But just then, from the depths of the barn, came a low, rasping sound, a voice that seemed to seep from the very shadows. "Join us, your boys belong to the woods." Jess stumbled back, recognizing that sinister drawl. The boys pressed against her, their small bodies shaking. She knew this night was only the beginning, and the shadows whispered promises of darker truths yet to be unveiled. They would have to leave before it was too late. But a creeping thought burrowed into her mind. Where would they go? What if Hawthorne didn't just want them to stay, it wanted to take them? Jess tightened her hold on her children, sensing the pervasive force pressing in on them. As the barn creaked and groaned, she realized one undeniable truth: they weren't just being watched, they were surrounded. The whispers continued, now more tangible, weaving through the air like smoke. "Come play with us, Jessie." And as darkness thickened around them, Jess could only imagine what horror awaited them next. What were the woods hiding, and what did they truly want? Everything in her screamed to flee, but escape was no longer an option. The air thickened, wrapping around Jess like a vice. She could feel the barn's cold breath on her skin, but it was the sound of shifting air that made her freeze. "Mommy, what's happening?" Eli's small voice trembled against the cacophony of whispers creeping from the shadows. "Should just stay close," Jess whispered, her eyes darting toward the dark corners of the barn. The oppressive darkness felt alive, and the very walls seemed to breathe with a sinister rhythm. Her mind raced as she fought against the panic threatening to engulf her. They had to get out. With a shuddering breath, Jess turned and pushed through the door, pulling her boys tightly to her side. But as they stepped out into the night, they found the world distorted. The trees loomed taller, their branches twisting grotesquely against the moonlit sky. The path back to the house seemed longer, darker. Anxiety clawed at her throat. "Jessie, come join us." The voice echoed again, louder this time, swirling around them like a storm. "No. We're not going anywhere," Jess shouted, forcing herself to move forward, her footsteps heavy against the earth. The boys clung to her legs, their eyes wide with fear, their small bodies no match for the dread closing in around them. Then came a rustle, drawing her attention. From the edge of the woods, mocking laughter rang out. A fleeting shadow darted between the trees. Jess's heart pounded like a war drum, every instinct screaming for her to run. She turned toward the house, but the light inside flickered as if uncertain. "Mommy, I'm scared," Noah whimpered, glancing back at the barn. What if the man gets us? No one is going to get you, Jess said, though her voice quavered. They sprinted toward the house, but the shadows along the path seemed to slither closer, elongating with each passing moment. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye near the barn. Jess halted, turning back just in time to see a tall figure emerge, a specter from the dark, bearing an unmistakable resemblance to Mr. Hale. His expression twisted in a grim smile, eyes glinting like shards of glass under the moon. "Come back, Jessie. They yearn for you, for all of you," he cooed, the edges of his voice wrapped in a velvet darkness. "No. Stay away from us," Jess yelled, her heart racing as she tried to shield her boys. They clung to her presence, the innocence in their faces giving room to stark terror. The woods shifted, the ancient trunk of an oak creaked loudly, almost in response to Hale's call. Then, amidst the matted shadows, the whispers crawled up her spine. A chorus of voices joined in chilling harmony. "Join us once bound, never free." Jess felt her fingers tremble on the boys' shoulders. They needed shelter. They needed safety. But with every glance back at the barn and its encroaching shadows, Jess knew this wasn't just about the woods anymore, it was about the very essence of her family. "Mommy, let us go," Eli pleaded, small hands tightening on her shirt. The innocence of his voice struck through the veil of horror enveloping her. Suddenly, a piercing scream resonated from within the woods, cutting through the whispers like glass. It was a chilling sound, familiar yet distant. Another layer of fear gripped her. It was a sound that echoed memories she tried to forget. "Run! Now!" Jess shouted as they took off toward the house, the darkness sinuous, reaching for them, threatening to pull them back. The wind howled, almost mocking their escape as branches clawed at their faces, and the malevolent whispers intensified, echoing in a taunting crescendo. Just as they reached the door, Jess felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. The wood creaked ominously, shadows lunged, and a chilling realization crested in her mind. Hawthorne wanted them, but not just for their presence. It craved their very souls. With an explosive force, the door swung open, revealing the dim light of the house, but just beyond it lurked the thick veil of terror. Jess hesitated only for a heartbeat before pushing her boys inside. As the door slammed shut behind them, the shadows pressed against the walls, a living force, eager to claim what they sought. But was the house really a sanctuary, or had it turned into a cage? In that frantic moment, Jess knew one thing: the fight was just beginning. What would the woods unleash next? What did they truly hold on to as night closed around them? The door shook violently behind Jess, rattling the ancient frame, as if the very house itself screamed in protest. Darkness bled into the corners, seeping under the sills of the windows, curling around her feet like restless serpents. Jess turned, drawing her boys close. The flickering light from the lantern illuminated their faces in harsh flashes, showing a mix of desperation and fear. "Mommy, what if he comes inside?" Eli's small voice, barely more than a whisper, broke the tense air. "He can't." "Not here," Jess lied, her heart racing. She glanced around the dimly lit room, the familiar furniture now stark and foreign under the spectral light. The shadows writhed, distorting the shapes of everything she once found comfort in. A creeping sensation of dread settled in her stomach, squeezing until she could hardly breathe. A low rumble echoed from outside, the sound of thunder or something more sinister drawing near. The windows rattled as if the storm was coming to answer the voices in the dark. Jess turned her back to the door, feeling the hollowness of the house. The oppressive weight of the silence settled around her. "What do we do?" Noah asked, his eyes wide, searching hers for reassurance. "Stay quiet, stay together," Jess commanded, though her own voice trembled. She knew they couldn't hide forever. The greater danger awaited just outside, lurking and whispering, waiting for the right moment to strike. A creak sounded from above. Jess's breath caught in her throat. "Did you hear that?" she hissed, her heart thundering against her ribs. The boys nodded, trembling, but she could see curiosity mingling with fear in their eyes. "Mommy, what if it's Sho?" Jess pressed a finger to her lips. She felt the walls pulse, echoing the sinister calls of the barn, suffocating her resolve. She needed to fortify their defenses. One by one, Jess started to push pieces of furniture against the door. Flimsy chairs, a sturdy table. Everything she could muster. "Help me," she urged the boys, their little hands moving to assist. Outside, the laughter returned, a low, menacing chuckle that sent chills cascading down her spine. "Jessie, come join us." The voice was layered with something unsettling, like it wasn't Mr. Hale at all but something worse, woven in shadows and malice. Each syllable dripped with allure, enticing yet horrifying. "No!" Jess barked, her eyes wild. She could feel her sanity fraying as the whispers filled her mind. She had to stay focused. Yet as she looked around the room, her memories whispered in tandem with the haunting call. Her husband's laughter echoed through the darkness, reminding her of times when they filled the house with joy. But those days felt light years away. The shadows seemed eager to swallow those memories whole. Footsteps thudded on the porch. Each heavy thump reverberated through the floorboards, stoking the fire of her terror. Jess turned sharply towards the sound, adrenaline pulsing in her veins. "They're coming." She quickly ushered her boys further into the house, into the safety of what she hoped was shelter. Then, as if answering her fears, the door handle twisted. Jess's breath caught. She pushed her body against the barricaded entrance, a futile attempt to hold back the encroaching malevolence. The door rattled violently, the wood splintering under the force. "Mommy!" Eli wailed, pure panic radiating off his small body. "Stay back!" she yelled, eyes darting. What lay beyond that door? Her mind seethed with possibilities, a figure darting through the shadows, the malevolent Mr. Hale, or something else entirely. The door slammed open, splintered wood cracking like a whip, the dark abyss beyond it yawning wide. At that moment, Jess realized she was fighting more than just for their lives. She was fighting for their souls, for the very essence that made them who they were. Then from the void, an echo carried through the chilling call of lost souls, whispering her name. "Jessie, come join us." Just before she could react, a cold wind surged inside, knocking her backward. The shadows rushed in like a tidal wave, and a surge of icy dread overcame her as she struggled to regain her footing. In that terrifying instant, everything became clear. They weren't just outside, they were also within the very fabric of the house. And Jess could feel their hungry gaze. What awaited her was not only fear, but a reckoning. The truth of her past would claw its way out. Desperation flickered in her eyes as the darkness crept closer, and she realized the battle wasn't just against something outside, but against a legacy that refused to die. What would her next move be? And could her family truly escape what the night had unleashed? The wind howled, a ravenous beast, echoing the fury of the storm now unleashed beyond the door. Jess stumbled back, her hands grasping at the floor to steady herself. The boys were wide-eyed, glued to her side as shadows clawed hungrily at the edges of reality. The lantern flickered, casting a sickly glow that twisted their faces into masks of fear. "We have to go," Jess shouted, her voice desperate, strained. The whispers surged, a cacophony of torment spiraling around them. "We can't stay here." Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but the house was a labyrinth of terror now, its identity warped by whatever dark force had invaded. She grabbed the boys' hands tight, trying to pull them along, but the shadows grasped at their heels like icy fingers, tugging them back. A heavy thud echoed from the hallway, reverberating through the walls with a bone-chilling resonance. Jess turned, her heart racing, eyes scanning the darkened corridor leading to the depths of the house. "What was that?" Noah whispered, his voice trembling. "Just the wind," Jess lied again, feeling the apprehension clawing at her heart. But panic surged through her veins, knowing this wasn't just a storm outside. It felt far worse. The voices grew louder, mixing with the creaks of the old house, rhythmically chanting her name like a sinister lullaby. "Jessie, come join us, Mommy!" Eli cried, burying his face into her side. "Shoo! We need to be quiet," she urged, wrapping an arm protectively around them. They needed a plan, somewhere to hide, but escape felt impossible. The darkness was alive, pressing in around them, swallowing what little light they had. Their SA basement, Jess suddenly recalled, memories flooding in uninvited. It had been years since she went down there stocking old jars and dusty heirlooms she'd avoided. But it was better than facing what lurked above. "We can hide there." Jess nodded decisively, her grip tightening on her boy's hands. "Now. Follow me." With her heart in her throat, she urged them into the corridor. The shadows throbbed with anticipation. Each step was a battle. They moved silently, knowing a single sound could summon the malevolence behind them. As they approached the basement door, Jess glanced back and froze. The doorway was shrouded in a deeper darkness, something monstrous stretched across its frame, watching like a predator poised to strike. Mommy, Eli trembled. "Noah, hold on to your brother," Jess commanded fiercely. She pulled the handle down and the door creaked open, revealing a dark stairway leading into utter blackness. The air was damp and musty, a heavy silence reigning like a grave. With her lantern flickering like a heartbeat, Jess urged her boys into the abyss. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, an icy finger brushed against her cheek, sending shivers spiraling down her spine. She slammed the heavy door shut behind them, trapping the shadows above. The darkness pressed in like a thick fog, wrapping around them. "Mommy, I don't like it," Noah whined, his voice trembling in the stillness. "Neither do I. But we're safe here for now," she whispered, though doubt gnawed at her heart. The flickering light of the lantern barely pierced the darkness surrounding them. Then, as if the house beneath them breathed, the floor shifted with a low, sinister groan. Jess felt her blood run cold. "Stay close," she murmured, fear creeping up her spine. The weight of something unspeakable was descending into the basement with them. A chill crept along her skin, and as they stepped deeper into the shadowed realm, her stomach dropped. "Mommy," the lantern flickered one last time before plunging them into darkness. Jess's heart raced. The echoes of the lost souls filled her ears again, a haunting melody that resonated with despair. "What if we can't get out?" Noah whispered, voice so small, and in that suffocating silence, Jess understood something truly terrifying. Whatever sought them was not just outside, it thrived in their memories, their thoughts hidden among the relics of her past. "Mommy!" Eli squeaked, and the low growl of something sinister reverberated around them, promising that the nightmare was only just beginning. What lay ahead in the darkness? Would the shadows consume them, or did they hold the key to a truth long buried? The darkness pressed on them, thick and suffocating. Jess felt the weight of it dragging her down, its icy fingers trailing along her arms, just waiting to claw her away. "Stay close," she repeated, trying to inject strength into her voice. But even she could hear the tremor beneath her words. The lantern sputtered, threatening to extinguish completely, casting them into an even deeper void. Jess strained her ears against the silence, willing it to break without foreboding. But the only sounds that echoed back were the racing hearts of her boys, each thump like a countdown, amplifying the fear thrumming in her chest. Mommy, Eli's whisper was soaked in dread, breaking through the stillness like glass shattering against concrete. Just the mere sound of his voice amplified the unsettling feeling, as if even the sound of their breath might awaken whatever tormented entity lurked in the shadows. "Jessie," a voice echoed again, softer this time, like a cruel caress. It was a whisper woven with malice, drifting from the corners of the endless black. She could feel it coiling around her mind, beckoning her to listen, to draw closer. To surrender. "Noah, hold on tight." With adrenaline surging, she squeezed her boy's hands tighter. The fabric of their clothes felt like the last fragile threads of sanity, fraying under the strain of terror. "We have to keep moving." They shuffled forward slowly, the damp floor slick beneath their feet. The air grew colder, biting into their skin. And as they descended into the belly of the house, each creak of the old wood resonated like a marrow-deep warning. With every step, Jess's stomach twisted tighter. Could they survive whatever was spiraling down into their very souls? A soft rustle echoed in the corner of her mind, snapping Jess's attention to something aglint. Where the lantern dimly flickered, a shimmer caught her eye. Shadows danced across the walls, and for a split second, she saw a figure dart toward the far end of the basement. Thin, gaunt, with elongated fingers. It paused just out of sight, and Jess felt her breath catch. "Did you see that?" she whispered, terror clawing at her throat. Noah glanced up, his expression pale. "See what?" Eli squeezed her hand even tighter, eyes wide. "Mommy, I'm scared." A low growl reverberated, building from nothing, an ominous rumble. It rose from the depths of the house below them, a spectral hunger. Jess felt it reverberate through her bones, making her hyper-aware of every heartbeat, every shallow breath. "Keep quiet," she hissed, blinking back tears. The dark was alive, no longer just a backdrop of fear, but a predator waiting to pounce. Her mind raced, searching for an escape plan. Just then, she remembered the old trunk in the corner. Maybe they could hide, burrow beneath the dust and forgotten memories. "Over there." She pointed, but the direction where she expected the trunk to be lay empty. The darkness had swallowed it whole. Panic surged. Nothing was where it should be. The shadows twisted and morphed, stirring like a living entity. Suddenly, Jess felt the icy breath on the back of her neck. She turned. Nothing. Just the black, a void that seemed to mock her with its silence. "Mommy!" Eli cried again, and in that moment, Jess's heart shattered. The noise drew closer, vibrating through the air, a creeping dread that promised them pain. "We have to get out now," she shrieked, tugging them toward where she thought the stairs lay. But as they stumbled backward, something tugged at her foot, and with horror, she realized they were not just stepping back into the halls of the basement, they were sinking into the floor. The darkness gripped them, and a chilling realization settled over Jess. This wasn't just a house. This was a trap, and deep within the shadows, something laughed, something ancient that had no business being in the world above. What secrets had the house buried beneath its floorboards? And who or what was determined to keep them there? Jess yanked her feet, but the darkness clung tighter, a suffocating vice wrapping around their ankles. Panic surged as tendrils of shadow slipped against her skin, creeping up to encircle her knees. This wasn't just menace, it was intent. It wanted them. "Mommy!" Eli's voice shattered the air, a brittle cry echoing against the basement walls. Jess felt the heat that pooled in her chest, the overwhelming need to protect. "Run! Just run!" she screamed, her voice stuttering against the weight of the air, but the ground was alive beneath them now, a living thing. The presence that lurked in the dark twisted and shifted, causing the wooden floor to lurch unnaturally. Jess felt Noah slip from her grasp, his small frame yanked sideways, swallowed by the gloom. "Noah!" Jess reached, stretched her hand, desperate. The lantern flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows, making her feel blind. Her heart raced. Every beat screamed for survival. Flashes of terror bloomed in her mind, the last time she lost her boys, echoes of laughter that danced like cruel knives. This was different. They were already losing ground, trapped in a deceivingly frail world that had come to life. "Noah, stay close!" she cried, the terror thick in her throat, and then silence. A ghastly, thick silence that settled like dust. It pressed in, smothering any hope of escape. Out of the black, Noah's small voice emerged. "Mommy, I can't see you." The terror knotted in her stomach. A ripple of something ancient passed through the air, chilling the moisture in her breath. She turned, ready to navigate the nightmare with unyielding resolve. Then, out of the shadows, a figure appeared. It loomed, a twisted silhouette without a face, yet Jess felt its gaze burning into her soul. Dark, gnarled fingers stretched toward her. The anguish etched into the shape radiated an unbearable hunger, a longing for something that lay deeper than mere flesh. "Get away from my boys!" Jess screamed, lunging toward the shadow. But with every step, it slid into the wall, melding with the darkness, its laughter echoing softly around her. The air shifted again, pulling Jess backward. She fought, flailing and scrambling, but the shadows were insistent, dragging her further down, anchoring her to this hellish floor. "Mom! Help!" Eli's terrified wail cut sharp through the suffocating quiet. Jess felt her heart shatter once more, splintering under the weight of desperation. "Hold on, Eli!" she cried, her voice breaking. Anguish clawed at her, yet somewhere deep, she found a flicker of a plan. "Trust me." With trembling hands, she released her grip on the dark, feeling it slick and wet against her skin. She dove toward the noise, toward the whispers horrifying and familiar. "Noah, Eli, follow my voice," she urged, feeling the heat of their bodies as they moved closer. Their small, terrified breaths mixed with her own, creating a storm of sound in the oppressive air, but the answering growl drowned her out. It was anything but human, a guttural sound that resonated deep in the floor. Shadows coalesced around them, threatening to close in. Jess's next action was instinctual. She pulled at the darkness. "We're stronger than you," she yelled into the void, her tone reeking of hope clashing against despair. The shadows quivered, as though her defiance surprised them. With that flicker of courage, the swirling darkness hesitated, unwinding just enough for her to grab Eli's hand. Noah, squeezed in close, trembled. Together, they retreated step by painstaking step. Could running truly lead them to salvation? But as they inched away from the lurking specter, something was undeniably off. The basement wasn't leading them back to the stairs, it was revealing itself. Their escape was only morphing into something darker, deeper. A cold pressure wrapped around them, guiding them toward a door, creaking with the promise of horror. "What is happening?" Eli whispered, eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. "Stay fearless, boys. Please." But her own heart was heavy, an anchor pulling her downward. As the door cracked open, a blinding light poured out, stark against the malevolent dark. A fleeting chance to escape, or another trap waiting to snap. Jess's final decision loomed heavy. What lay beyond the light? Would it save them or seal their fate? And in that pivotal moment, a chilling echo trembled through her bones. "You can't escape." Jessica's breath caught. That voice, it had belonged to a loved one. But how was that possible? How deep did the horror run? The door swung open, revealing a blinding light that pierced through the oppressive darkness. It was an unforgiving luminescence, almost too bright for her eyes to bear. Jess hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest, clawing for some semblance of reason in the chaos. "Mommy, I don't want to go," Eli whimpered, squeezing her hand tighter as his small fingers trembled. "No, we have to. It's our only chance." Jess pulled them closer, trying to shield them from the flickering shadows that still hovered at the edges, waiting, watching. With a stealing breath, she stepped into the light, dragging her boys behind. But instead of the expected escape, the air thickened around them, filling with a dense fog that consumed everything in sight. The sensation of freedom quickly faded as the light warped, morphing into a swirling vortex of brightness that spun wildly around them. "Noah? Eli?" Her voice broke, echoing into the thick mist, desperate for their reassurance. Panic clawed at her throat as she felt them slip. "Hold on to my hand." But the grip on her was loosening, the grasp of her children fading into the fog. She felt more alone with every passing second. "Stay with me," she shouted, but the din of whispers rose again, seeping through the air like poison. "Mom!" Eli's voice came from somewhere off to the right, sharp and panicked. Jess turned, instinctively reaching out again. "Eli!" She twisted through the fog, her heart racing, panic threatening to envelop her like the shadows. A chill ran through her as she stumbled, nearly losing her footing on the vaporous ground. And then, from the depth of the mist, Noah appeared, face pale, eyes wide with terror. "I'm scared." His voice cracked, laced with something unnameable. "Stay close," Jess cried, her own fear layered over a mother's steely resolve. But the whispering grew louder, weaving in and out like an ancient chant, wrapping around her ears and tightening around her head, drowning her in its dread. Just that voice, familiar yet time-worn, curling around her like smoke. It filled her lungs with dread. It was the same voice she heard just before everything had started, just before their lives twisted into this nightmare. She turned, her heart already racing, preparing to face whatever it was, whatever loved one had been drawn back to this realm. "Jess, come back, we need you," she blinked against the haze, trying to push through the fog, but each word felt like a blade, stabbing through her consciousness. Images flashed their home, laughter, love, tainted with the familiar darkness. The unsettling dread clawed back at her, twisting every warm memory into something cold and sinister. "Please!" Jess shouted as if her voice could shatter the illusion. Each pulse of despair felt like a fracture in reality, each moment stretched thin with impending doom, the sensation that time was unraveling beneath her feet, and then came the lurch, the ground beneath shifting with a shudder. Eli cried out again, a raw sound that pierced through the chaos, echoing in her thoughts. "Mommy!" It was a call for her, pulling her back from the edge. "Eli, Noah, hold on." But then silence. Absolute, bone-chilling silence. Jess felt the darkness creeping back, entwining itself around her once more, deeper, colder. It began to caress her skin, wrapping around her wrists and ankles, constricting her breath. What looped around them wasn't just shadow anymore, it was tethering her to this torment, promising that escape would always elude her. Jess fought against the darkness, trying to wrench free. We're not done," she roared, feeling the heat of defiance swell in her chest. The shadows recoiled as she pressed onward, pushing through the oppressive silence, feeling that familiar love need filling her heart. But as she tore at the darkness, a repulsive, guttural laughter filled the air, echoing off unseen walls. She felt a pull, deeper now, as though the shadows appreciated her struggle, anticipating the very moments of despair that would tie her even closer. "Noah! Eli!" Jess's voice cut through the dull resonance of the laughter as the shadows closed in tighter, a vice around her heart. And then she stumbled into something, or someone. A presence materializing from the mist, so familiar, yet terrifying all at once, a face twisted with pain, eyes gleaming with a sorrowful hunger she couldn't comprehend. "Why did you leave me?" it whispered. The realization struck like ice, this was her own shadow. In that moment, the air crackled with an ancient dread. Jess felt the warmth of tears streaming down, but she couldn't let the darkness consume her. What would it take to fight this? To free herself and her boys from the grip of whatever haunted them? The light dimmed, swirling into a vortex that seemed to mock her. The voice morphed into a chorus, hundreds of echoing whispers rising in chilling unison. "Jess, you can never escape, the truth will find you." Her breath quickened, her children still somewhere in the haze, the shadows closing in with insatiable hunger. Could she truly break free? Or was the path to the light only a deeper descent into the nightmare? As the shadows coiled closer, Jess's heart thundered in the silence, a prayer for clarity, a scream against despair, that somehow they would remember who they were amidst this blend of light and dark, and in that darkest of moments, the echoes of the past mingled with the present, forming a riddle that left no room for doubt. Were they truly lost? Or was she merely discovering the truth they all feared to see? The laughter receded, leaving a perverse silence that echoed in Jess's ears. Panic surged within her, a drowning wave that threatened to pull her under. "Eli! Noah!" She screamed again, her voice raw and frantic, flailing in desperation. The shadows pressed tighter, creeping along her skin like crawling vines, their chilling touch stealing her breath, fanning the flames of her terror. "Jess, stay with me," the whisper returned, and it was her own voice, twisted, mocking. It snaked through the void, each syllable laced with venom, biting into her mind. Her shadow, a distorted version of herself, loomed closer, its features warped into a grotesque grin. She turned from it, desperately searching the darkness for her boys. Each step sent her deeper into the cold abyss, where her heart thudded like a drum, reverberating against the silence. The mist thickened, pressing in on her, swirling with an intent that chilled her bones. There was a weight in the air, a promise of doom that hung like a guillotine ready to drop. "Mommy, where are you?" Eli's voice was a distant echo now, mingling with the edge of fear. It was threading through the fog, just barely a whisper but still anchored to her heart. She clung to it like a lifeline. "I'm coming, I promise," she cried, racing toward his voice. But something shifted in the darkness. Shapes began to emerge, twisted figures that moved with a jagged grace, their limbs stretching unnaturally as they glided silently past her. Each shadow held a face twisted in agony, mouths screaming wordless cries that pressed against her mind. "Jess, they don't belong to you," one of the shadows cooed, a scaled hand reaching for her. "Give and let us take them." "No." She instinctively recoiled, fighting to shake the sensation of grasping fingers brushing against her wrist. The air crackled around her, charged with malevolence. As if on cue, the thick mist parted suddenly, revealing a narrow path surrounded by darkness. Her heart seized. It was there, a fleeting glimpse of light just ahead. But the shadows swirled, desperate to imprison her anew. They locked her in a vice of despair as the laughter returned, warped and chaotic. "Noah! Eli!" she shouted as she sprinted down the path, heart pounding, lungs burning. Every step felt heavy, dragging her down, but she pressed on, desperate to reach the doorway of radiant light waiting at the end. But as she skidded to a stop, the light flickered, there and gone, taunting her. And in that moment of hesitation, the world around her trembled. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony that hammered into her skull, an insatiable hunger longing to pull her in. Jess felt her body lurch backward as if the darkness was clawing her away from that glimmer of hope. "Stop!" she cried, voice trembling, desperation spilling over. "Get away from me!" The shadows held their ground, their laughter becoming a chorus that echoed all around. "You will never escape. You're one of us, you always have been." A shiver coursed through her veins as the realization burgeoned, a haunting intuition whispering that the shadows weren't just her enemies, they were her past, her fear, the twisted remnants of her own soul. With renewed determination, she pushed forward into the light, forcing her way through the shadows that closed in around her. "I refuse to be a part of this," she roared, battling against the pull of the darkness, which writhed like a living beast. And then, a hand grabbed hers, small, warm, and real. Jess spun around, hope surging through her heart as her eyes found Eli, his face pale but determined, standing firm before the encroaching shadows. "Mommy! I found you!" he cried. "Noah!" she shouted, scanning frantically. But the shadows stirred, thickening again, drawing nearer, as more hands reached for her. Each face within the darkness became recognizable, people she'd lost, their vacuous eyes filled with longing. They were memories manifesting, tethering her to a past she'd fought to escape. Tears stung her eyes as she tightened her grip on Eli. "We have to go, Eli. Now!" With a sudden jolt, the ground beneath them gave way, the shadows swirling violently as a chasm opened up, revealing a pulsing void that whispered promises of despair. The air turned cold, choking her resolve. "Jess, join us," the chorus pleaded, now softer, seducing her senses with haunting familiarity. "It's time to embrace the truth." As they hovered on the brink, Jess stood paralyzed, her heart racing. Was this the abyss that awaited them, or the salvation they so desperately needed? "Don't listen!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the unfolding darkness. "Remember who you are. Remember me." But the shadows answered with a deafening roar, and the ground crumbled beneath her feet. In that stark moment, everything collided, the past, the present, the whispers, her very being unraveling. Would she fall into the void or rise above the deadly embrace of her fears? Just at that breathless cusp, Jess felt a powerful pull, a violent hunger from the darkness. The abyss yawned wide, and the truth awaited. Would the truth save them or seal their fate? Jess's heart raced as the shadows writhed. She felt the ground shudder beneath her, the abyss threatening to swallow them whole. Not today, she hissed, digging her heels into the earth. Hold on tight, Eli. She cast her eyes desperately around, searching for Noah, but the darkness had its grip on him. She could feel it in the chilled air. The whispering grew louder, echoing around her, compelling her to surrender. Jess, come join us. It was a lure wrapped in despair, a melody that echoed her own yearning. The pain of loss, of grief, felt palpable, drawing her into an endless cycle of anguish. But as she battled the shadows, memories flashed, their laughter, their smiles, their purity. Memories that were worth fighting for. Eli. We go toward the light. She cried, her voice breaking through the maelstrom. She took a deep breath, determined to break free from the shadows binding them. Listen to my voice. With a surge of strength, she pulled Eli closer, pressing through the thick, swirling mist. As they moved, the shadows that had once seemed suffocating started to pull away, hesitating, confused by her defiance. We have to keep moving. I'm scared. Eli whimpered, but Jess felt the warmth of their connection ignite a fire within her, an unwavering hope that pushed back against the darkness. I'm scared too, but we can't stop. Then she heard it, the fractured sob of Noah, echoing somewhere within the blackness, tugging at her heart. Noah! Stay where you are! She shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. I'm coming to get you. With determination coursing through her, Jess summoned every ounce of unconditional love she had for her boys. That memory of holding them close during the sunny days, those fleeting moments when laughter had filled their home, ignited her spirit. Around her, shadows began to recoil, eyes narrowing as if her memories burned them. Jessie, they belong with us. They hissed, their voices distorted and chilling. No. She thrust her fist forward, feeling the fight swell within her. They belong with me. She stepped toward the light, pulling Eli with her, urgency driving her forward. Noah. We're coming. Out of the haze, she spotted Noah, his tiny frame trembling, engulfed by shadows that grasped at him hungrily. Her heart shattered at the sight, but as she steadied herself, an electric resolve surged through her veins. I'm here, hold on. I'm coming. No. The shadows screeched, swirling in a frenzy, but Jess refused to yield. She lunged forward, reaching out, grasping Noah's hand, and for a beautiful, terrifying moment, the room seemed to breathe with harmony. Light erupted from their combined touch, blazing defiantly against the encroaching dark. The shadows hissed and wailed, as if their very fabric was unraveling, the power of true love igniting the air. Run! Jess shouted, pulling both boys tight against her. Run toward the light. They surged together, a unit forged in love and desperation, drawing closer to the brilliant glow that beckoned them forth. With each stride, Jess felt the shadows retract, their cries fading into the depths of despair as they melted away. Together, the three of them burst through the threshold into the blinding radiance, tumbling into a world of warmth. The brightness surged around them, washing away the chill of the past and the weight of fear. Breathless, they fell onto the soft grass outside the haunted farmhouse, the moonlight wrapping around them like a protective embrace. Jess lay there for a moment, her boys clinging to her tightly. She could feel their heartbeats racing against her, solid and alive. The farmhouse stood behind them, dilapidated and dark, but it felt distant now, part of a nightmare they had escaped. We made it. Eli cried, laughing through his tears. The relief crashed over Jess like a wave, merging with joy that tinged her heart. Noah. Eli. She pulled them close, their warmth severing the last remnants of fear, aching with love and gratitude. She couldn't lose them, not ever again, but deep in her heart, Jess knew that the haunting echoes would linger. The past. Wasn't he entirely banished? Those shadows were still tethered to her, waiting for a moment of weakness. Realizing that acceptance and courage would be needed every day of their lives, they stood together, united against the darkness. With hands interlocked, Jess led her boys away from the remnants of Hawthorne, their laughter filling the crisp, cool night. The past had left scars, but it wasn't all that they were. They were survivors, alive with hope and love, determined to rewrite their stories on the canvas of tomorrow, and so, with hearts alight and souls intertwined, Jess took her boys forward into the dawn, ready for whatever tales tomorrow would tell. Now it's your turn. If you loved this spine-tingling conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss out on our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep amazing tales like this coming, and don't keep this sensational ending to yourself. Flood the comments section with your reactions and wild theories. Let us make sure everyone sees this conclusion. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this. Don't wait even one more second. Your support makes all the difference.